May is Mental Health Month, a time for raising awareness and educating ourselves in order to erase the stigma attached to mental illness. So with that in mind, here are 5 things to be aware of about mental illness. Number 1, it's more common than you might think. Here in the United States, 1 in 5 people experience a mental illness and 1 in 25 experience a serious mental illness every year. And about half of us will experience some form of mental illness at some point in our lives. It costs Americans nearly $2 billion in lost earnings every year. It's the leading cause of disability worldwide, and it's a contributing factor to 9 out of 10 suicides. And yet there remains an undeniable stigma attached to it. Mentally ill people are stereotyped as volatile and unsafe to be around. But despite that stereotype, number 2, people with mental illnesses aren't dangerous. Popular culture does a terrible disservice to people with mental illnesses, frequently depicting them as seriously disturbed and violent. The truth is, the overwhelming majority of violent crimes, between 95 and 97%, are committed by people who aren't experiencing mental illness. Multiple studies have shown that the incidence of violence among people with mental illnesses is extremely low, and the link between mental illness and violence is greatly exaggerated in the minds of most people. Mental illness is so common that if you have never experienced it yourself, you almost certainly know someone who has. It does not typically turn people into criminals, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a connection between mental illness and crime. Number 3, people with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims. A lot more likely. People with severe mental illnesses, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or severe depression, are 10 times more likely to be victims of violent crime than the average person. If you don't experience mental illness, but you know somebody who does, remember that statistically speaking, you represent a much greater threat to them than they do to you. And yet mentally ill people are the ones that we have forced into the shadows because we too often value our own comfort over the well-being of other people. Speaking of which, number 4, mental illness disproportionately affects marginalized communities. Of course, all people with mental illnesses are part of at least one marginalized group, the community of people with mental illnesses. But if they also happen to be, say, a person of color or a member of the LGBTQ community, they may face even greater struggles. LGBTQ folk are twice as likely to experience mental illness and between 2 and 3 times as likely to attempt suicide. Prevalence of mental illness is relatively equal among racial groups, slightly lower among Hispanics and Asians, higher for Native Americans, about even for white and black folks. But non-white people are significantly less likely to seek out mental health services. And when they do, they are far more likely to experience discrimination and cultural insensitivity, which results in a lower quality of care. But even they would have to be considered fortunate compared to those who are unable to receive care in the first place. Number 5, many people still can't access mental health care. Access to mental health resources has improved somewhat here in the U.S. since the passage of the Affordable Care Act, but there are still many people who have health coverage that does not treat mental health care with the same priority as it treats physical health care. Many older health plans and some forms of Medicare and Medicaid were exempted from the law mandating mental health parity. And in states that did not participate in the ACA's Medicaid expansion, nearly 20% of uninsured adults experience mental illness. If that number didn't get your attention, how about this one? From 2009 to 2012, $5 billion was cut from state mental health care budgets. Here's another one. Every year, more than 5 million people are forced to seek help for mental health-related issues at emergency rooms, which are often not equipped to give them the help they need. People with mental illnesses shouldn't be treated like outcasts or shamed into silence. They are our friends, our families, our coworkers, ourselves. And we deserve better. The hardest part is picking only 5. Catch you next time. Hey folks, hope you found this one worthwhile. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron.